Hello, my name is Gustav Lansner. I'm a project manager at the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden. This May, our chairman, Stephen Broer, and I visited the Xizang, also known historically as Tibet. We have previously posted a short report on our visit, which I'll put up a link to, but today we would like to have a longer, more in-depth talk on this highly significant autonomous region of China. And as an introduction to this discussion, I would like to make some preliminary remarks on the significance of the geographical location and the very unique geological features of the region, because these serve, in my opinion, as is the case for any society, as fundamentally important preconditions for how that society might develop over time. Xizang is the second largest province in China after Xinjiang and is about the size of all of the Nordic countries combined. To the east, it borders obviously the more eastern parts of China, and to the south it borders India as well as Nepal and Bhutan. It is also quite close to the Central Asian countries as well as to Pakistan and Afghanistan. So even though it might easily be perceived as a very remote location, it's actually situated very centrally in Asia, which is something that has certain strategic implications. Xizang is largely comprised of a relatively flat plateau area, which has an average elevation of 4,500 meters above sea, and which is often referred to as the roof of the world. This plateau area is bordered by several mountain ranges, notably the Himalayan ridge to the south and the Kunlun mountains to the north. These geological features have, in my opinion, some far-reaching economic implications, not only for the immediate area, but for the entire surrounding region, including other parts of China and India. For the immediate area, the very high elevation leads to a harsh climate, which is challenging from an economic perspective. But for the surrounding regions, the mountainous area is a life giver, as the tens of thousands of mountain glaciers feed almost all the rivers in the surrounding region, including the Yellow River, the Yangtze River, and the Mekong River, which are the three longest rivers in all of Asia, as well as the Brahmaputra and the Ganges, which are obviously very important rivers for India. So this enormous supply of fresh water, along with the relatively warm climate of the surrounding regions, has given rise to the most densely populated areas on Earth and to the two most populous nations on Earth, which are China and India. Okay, so that was a sort of general introduction to the geography. Do you want to add something to that, Stephen, or should we get on to discussing our visit?
Well, no, I think that's extremely important that it has a very central role in the Asian continent. For a variety of reasons, both geographically and historically. But one point that I think is quite interesting is coming out of the recent BRICS conference in Kazan in China. In Russia, the agreement began now between the president of China, Xi Jinping, and the prime minister of India, Modi, to reestablish a cooperative solution to what has been a so-called conflict on the border regions. Now, this is a great and very hopeful development because it means that whereas there has been an enormous amount of geopolitical fighting over the question of what has been historically called Tibet or what is called Xizang now in China as the autonomous province. This has the potential for actually ending these geopolitical manipulations and moving the area to a making what can be a very incredible and impressive contribution to global development, not only in terms of its own unique resources and positions, but also in the context of the developments around the Belt and Road Initiative, which, as the chairman of the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden, I'm working around the clock with my colleagues to inform and bring, especially Western Europe and even the United States and other, even Great Britain, to accept and ultimately embrace the BRI as a global development perspective. And obviously, the potential in what is historically been called Tibet has a tremendous and tremendous potential and can make very important contributions to that. So I think that's sort of a very important development, that this ability now to resolve what has been a thorn in the side of Indian and China relations can actually be overcome and lead to the kind of cooperation which will make an incredible difference for global development.
Hmm. Yeah, that's very nice. Okay, so when we landed in Xizang at I think it was called the Lhasa Gongar Airport, the first thing that struck me was, apart from the mountains, obviously, it was all of the modern infrastructure that you saw all around. We landed at a very modern airport. There were nice roads, bridges, everything was electrical and telecom grids, schools, hospitals, and so on. Everything modern, completely modern. So when you're there on the ground, it's quite apparent that the integration of this region with the rest of China has brought incredible economic development to the region. And yet there are complaints being raised about human rights, which seems maybe a bit ironic, given that we're talking about a region where 70 years ago over 1 million people were living in abject poverty as slaves and serfs, and were more or less the property of a ruling class, and had an expected lifespan of around 30 years, with total illiteracy and no prospects for development at all. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on that, also in light of the fact that you recently attended the 2024 China-Europe Seminar on Human Rights in Berlin. Yeah.
Well, there's no question that together with yourself, our arrival in Lhasa was a totally unique experience. I had never really even been able to imagine what it would be like to arrive in this region, historically known as Tibet. It obviously has been an area that's discussed in all kinds of different ways in popular history and so forth. But there's no question the most striking thing is, as you've already pointed out, is the level of modernization and development was way beyond anything that I would have conceived possible. That's the first thing that you can't in any way avoid. The airport is very modern. The transport from the airport to our accommodation, our hotel, was in buses that also provided oxygen because it is the case that the altitude is quite high in even these areas which are not directly in the immediate Himalayas, which of course are about twice as high as the altitude in Lhasa. But it was remarkable to see how this area has become so developed. One sees that despite these incredible mountain areas, there is electrical connections, there's telecom connections. It is the case that the population, the total population in Tibet or Xizang is only about 3 million people, approximately 3.5. I'm not quite sure exactly, but approximately 3 million. It's a very, very small population compared to the land area that is larger than, as you've already pointed out, the Scandinavian countries together, even about twice as big as France. To give people an idea that you're talking about an extremely large area with an extremely limited sized population. But despite that, the developments since the democratization of Tibet, which occurred in 1959, and it is since it has been now 65 years, this has been a point of celebration for the developments in China, where they have lifted out of that population of some 3 million, 600,000 people out of extreme poverty. Now, this is similar to what has been done in China as a whole, where most people should know, if they don't, that China has already lifted and successfully lifted over 800 million Chinese out of extreme poverty, and they are going forward with that development, both internally and with the developments around the Belt and Road Initiative.
Mm.
So this is a universal concept of development. I think that it is even mentioned in a recent film, which I had the opportunity to see, Inside Tibet, a documentary film, that even the 14th Dalai Lama, who has his own perspective on what is actually the issue for who has sovereignty over this area, admitted that this was an extremely positive development for the people of Tibet or of Xizang, that this development and modernization admittedly is something that was never done in earlier historical times. It was never the intention of, for example, the British, who had already colonized and occupied what is today India. but they were also interested in Tibet because it bordered the area of India, which they wanted to maintain tight control over. So their intervention militarily into Tibet was nothing more than an enforcement of uh, not only colonialism, but this horrible existence for the greater majority of the Tibetan population, which is serfdom and poverty. So that has changed. And by being on the ground, you cannot uh, have that opportunity and not witness it. It's obvious. And if more people would have that option or that possibility or opportunity to go, they would see it for themselves. Whatever you want to argue in terms of certain historical issues, the developments in what is Xizang, or historically Tibet, have been remarkable and continue to represent the kind of direction that China has uh, both internally, as I said, and also in light of their objectives for global development with the Belt and Road Initiative.
Mm. Yeah, so this documentary that you referred to here, was it called Inside Tibet?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's the title of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
perhaps should have mentioned that this was a film, a documentary film, which has generally been censored. But one of the participants at when you had asked me about my participation in the conference in Berlin, which was sponsored by China Human Rights Society and the Central South University, which is in Chongqing. Uh, this was defined as how to build a understanding of both achieving human rights for Europe and China together. And it was in that context where it was where I became aware of this. I think it's a remarkably well done documentary, and I certainly hope that it gets more widespread recognition and possibilities for being viewed by people, especially in the West, because of the general misrepresentation that is continuing to try and identify falsely that the people of Xizang are being treated in some horrible manner where their religious freedom and their historical and ability to maintain, for example, the educational programs in Tibetan language. We visited a school, and it was very clear, middle school, that this is also completely false. That they are teaching to all the children, the majority of whom in Tibet are Tibetan background, both languages. Well, actually three, not only Tibetan and Mandarin, but also English. So the idea again of elevating the population above a backwardness is been moving forward and certainly would be more properly understood if the Western population had a more balanced and accurate picture. But hopefully, these kinds of interactions and videos that we're doing will provide that type of perspective for people. It's sorely needed.
mm. Yeah, I might add there, the school we visited, our first stop in the visit was a middle school. and that was a totally lovely experience. We were greeted in this very for me overwhelming way, with this very ceremonial music and dance and everything. It was a incredible experience, and we got to to walk around in the school, in the classrooms, and we saw everything from like traditional herbal medicine being studied by the children, and to AI and robotics, including, as you say, the languages, and it was a very lovely experience. And I think we met in the schoolyard. We met hundreds of children, and they all seemed to me genuinely happy, and very happy to see us, and just very excited about all of this, and that's something that, in my opinion, is very hard to script. Hundreds of children behaving in a naturally relaxed and happy manner. That's so if you're there on the ground, you can see for yourself these things. I also wanted to. You mentioned the British. They actually. I just wanted to take that up because I'm not sure that everybody is aware that Britain actually invaded Tibet, or as it, in 1904, I think, killing. If I don't remember incorrectly, I think they killed around 600 Tibetans during the invasion. Of course, they were, infinitely more powerful. So they couldn't put up much resistance. But in this documentary, they have a quote from that time. What the British said about why they were in Tibet. Of course, it was motivated by, a kind of human rights kind of sentiment that we're going to civilize these people and help these people, as is the case for, I guess, most of the colonial era invasions. And the quote is, they said, that there is an ultimate fortress of obscurantism crushing a miserable people, was the quote from this documentary. So that's how the British saw this area at that time. I just wanted to add that. But when it comes to what was there more you wanted to say? Because we talked before about education. Here, was there more you wanted to say on that subject, or should I go to the next question?
Well, I can just add, you mentioned that the British invasion in 1904. Now, this is approximately the same time that the British Empire revamped its focus from being the dominant maritime power in the 1800s to what was the geopolitical view of Halford Mackinder, who is the founder of British Geopolitics. That is the dominant thought process behind what is presently should be identified as the Anglo-American empire, or what they often refer to as a unipolar or rules-based order. Now, because a lot of people, maybe including a lot of Americans or even individual people in Britain who do not necessarily understand this history by any means, they're nonetheless victims of being a part of, to this very day, of geopolitics, which is how to divide and manipulate the world according to the power interests of this particular elite faction, which has nothing to do with the basic rights of human beings. The fact that this is behind to and has been behind historical developments in Tibet point to the or should point to the fact to anyone who is not ignorant that this is a new chapter that they are playing for a kind of separatism, which of course the government in China will not tolerate and rightfully should not tolerate, because this kind of separatism, not alone is it create chaos, but the intention has nothing to do with general development, for example, even for the people of Xizang, or for the development of humanity generally, in terms of what has been the proposal for the Belt and Road Initiative. And that is the framework, not just it was initiated, as everyone should know, by Xi Jinping in 2013 as a proposal for global development by China. But it is not an extension of only China's so-called individual power. It is a proposal that is open to the world at large. And there are now numbers, not only 150 nations that have already agreed to it, but there are increasing interests from new nations that are, even in the most recent period, there is now a discussion about Brazil joining the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, they're also a member of BRICS, but it is now the case that Xi Jinping will be traveling for a state visit to Brazil, and that is on the table. Whether it will be consolidated, I don't know at the moment, but there is no question that the president of Brazil is inclined towards the direction of working together with the Belt and Road Initiative. So these are the two options. One is to have a global development perspective, which is also reflected by the meetings in Kazan in Russia with the BRICS, with an increasing number of nations aligning themselves with the global majority for the South, which is the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. On the other hand, the geopolitical game of manipulating and dividing nations in order to promote conflict and even war, that is not a good alternative. And we are threatened by that clearly in today's circumstances, in both what is occurring in Ukraine as well as in Southwest Asia, in the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians in Gaza, and these other types of monstrosities that should be ended as absolutely soon as possible.
Yeah, I might just add there, for those who don't know, that during this recent meeting in Kazan, they decided that there were going to be 13 more like partner countries to the BRICS collaboration, including Belarus and Turkey, and also a lot of I think, a lot of countries in South Asia, and I don't remember exactly all of them, but anyway, 13 new partner countries in the BRICS collaboration. So that's quite good progress, I think. So my getting back to to our visit, I also wanted to talk about this amazing, like how to say live. I think you call it a live action open, like this huge stage where they have this drama performance called Princess Wensheng, which I think, yeah, I think it's the most amazing, yeah, dramatic performance I've seen in my life. It's an outside stage, which is I don't know how wide it was, but it was. I mean, yeah, it was just a staggeringly majestic performance with the mountains as a backdrop and hundreds of performers and uh, opera singing by two opera stars and so on. Yeah, it was incredible, and it tells the story about Princess Wensheng of the Tang Dynasty, who traveled I don't know how far, but very far from the more central parts of China to to what was then the Tibetan Empire to marry the king Songtsen Gampo. This was in the 7th century, I think, and it was not only did this sort of obviously serve to integrate these regions culturally, but Princess Wensheng was actually the one who brought Buddhism, including the first Buddhist statue, to Xizang. So, because Buddhism was at that time very popular in the Tang court where she came from. So yeah, I mean, we can't discuss this without discussing the Buddhist religion, and yeah, I wanted to. The point here was that Buddhism has as a core tenet, it has compassion for every living thing, you know, as a core principle, which was, I think, very, very beautifully portrayed in this drama performance that we saw. And at the same time, it seems to me that religion in this region, as it has in many other places, times and places in history, not least in the West with Christianity, there's been a situation where the clergy has sort of been used by the aristocracy or the ruling elite to maintain a kind of social order which is very beneficial to them, but which doesn't really serve the common good. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on that point.
This performance, this dramatic opera was astounding. First, because it took place in an outside theater, which was in which the background were the incredible mountains of the area, the maybe not the Himalayas, but the mountains that are in the background of Lhasa. Look, this is an example. This was attended by hundreds of people, I think. I don't know exactly how many, but it's an outside theater. One thing that's obvious is the idea that there is a cultural repression preventing the celebration of the history of Tibetan culture is nonsense. This was a shining example of how the culture is a living process that is available to people. As you mentioned, Princess Wenchen traveled from at that time in the 600s from the capital of China, which was Xi'an, and has enormous historical importance, but was thousands of kilometers at a time when travel across mountains and rivers for a young woman uh, were unbelievable. And she was leaving, as part of the story reflects, the comfort of her arrangements in her own life in Xi'an as a member of the royal family, and at least risking that by traveling all the way to the capital of Tibet, Lhasa, at that time. Uh, the general point is that culture is under no kind of repression uh, as it is being argued and propagated in Western thinking. This was an example, but we also visited the famous Buddhist temple, Potala, where there are hundreds of not alone visiting uh, the Buddhist uh, temple, which is still a marking for Buddhist religion. Uh, Many hundreds of Buddhist monks who are still actively worshiping. Uh, the limitation on the question of religious freedom is only that it will not be accepted if it is in the context of religious, or I should say, political separatism. As long as it is a religious celebration, as it is for Muslims, where I was also visiting in Xizang, there is no restrictions. There are no problems with that. It is only when these things are used in a more radicalized perspective to attempt a form of separatism or attempts to separate these areas in the form of, uh, of political geopolitics that it will not be accepted. But the culture is alive. Uh, our visit, as we've already mentioned, in the question of education is alive. And I think the direction is one that is showing, which it should be, that the basic values of human rights has to begin with the idea of the basic right of human beings to knowledge and their creative thinking, their creative capacities. If that is not uh, primary, then there are really artificial discussions that are motivated by, as I've already mentioned, generally by geopolitical motivations. So, I mean, I felt that not alone was this a remarkable journey in terms of witnessing the general modernization and economic development, which is, as already stated, it's not only the schools, it's the hospitals. I was also able to visit there. We also visited the development of the yak, which are the animals that live naturally in the Tibetan area. Uh, they're also not alone for purposes of eating meat, and but they are now being cultivated for the purposes of milk and yogurt, which is then being distributed as part of a general development in that we visited, one of the private firms that is actually taken up. So we're seeing, as well as an art gallery where we saw many remarkable paintings which reflect this idea of Buddhist religious thinking. And these are things you see in front of your own eyes when you visit. So I find it very tiresome that the ones that generally are the loudest voices, especially coming from the United States and the European Union, which are ignorant voices that are playing a very, in my view, dirty game that is not based on an accurate picture of what is actually on the ground. Hopefully, this will come to an end in the not distant future, but I think it's very important that our audience and people everywhere have an ability to see the insight of how the type of experience we had, which by no means is the last time that I will hopefully travel to Tibet or to Xizang. I think there might be another conference, Himalayan conference that might be coming up in 2025, which I've been informed that I might well be invited to. This is how we overcome the ignorance and the manipulation that is unfortunately still a factor in how people in Europe and unfortunately in Sweden generally are being manipulated in their beliefs of what is really going on. So it's a great, I mean, it was a privilege not only in economic development, but to witness the living process of the culture that is ongoing. And that includes, obviously, the history of the Buddhist religion, which has been a major factor not only in Tibet, but in terms of India and China as well. So people have to look into these historical questions, understand the reality, and experience things. May not be that simple, but hopefully there will be opportunities for people also to have the chance to see things for themselves, experience it, and witness the fact that these events that are generally misrepresented are just simply not true. I think this, as we've mentioned, this Inside Tibet documentary does a very good job of giving a historical perspective, which is not under the immediate control of the propaganda networks, and therefore they don't even allow, at least for the time being, that this documentary would be shown I think, at least in Germany and France. But certainly I hope it will spread, because I think both you and I have watched it and found it extremely informative and enlightening.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, we spent maybe a week, 10 days there, and I mean, you, of course, you get to see, it's very, I mean, incredibly important, of course, but still you barely scratch the surface. Obviously, I mean, you can't experience a a civilization in 10 days. It doesn't happen. But and then it's even more absurd for someone who have never been there and yeah, to have very strong opinions. But yeah, something that people have strong opinions about is this. We already mentioned that the British invaded um, uh, yeah, Tibet, Xizang in 1904. But that's very little known. But I think what's much more well known is when the PRC went into and annexed the region. That's a very that's what people, if you talk to people about this, that's what everybody refers to. What they refer to is immediately, and it's so they see it as very clear cut, like that there's this innocent, very peaceful people, and here you have these very aggressive people, and they are coming here and invading these people. So, but maybe that's a bit of an oversimplification, or what would you respond to that kind of thinking?
Well, I mean, the historical context of what was going on is complex. We're talking about what happens at the end of World War II, and the development of, at that time, what had been a kind of civil war, and during the combination of the horrendous occupation of the Japanese in China, which most people are, unfortunately, in the West, completely ignorant of the fact that the Japanese occupation actually had slaughtered 35 million Chinese. That's approximately in the area of about 6 times the number of victims which were horribly murdered by the Hitler regime in Europe against the Jews. Chinese human beings are, in my view, and every human being is as valuable as anyone else. I think mass murder should never occur. But the fact that the slaughter against the Chinese people, which the Japanese have never apologized for officially, neither against the Chinese or against the Koreans. So the point is that the complexity of what has been a fundamental question for humanity, and still is the issue of development, and that has taken many different forms. I think the initial annexation, invasion by China was a part of their perspective, which has and did ultimately emerge in the democratization of Tibet, and has led to a vast improvement in the life of human beings and people of Tibet, and the people we associated with, which of course is, I mean, it's not the entire population, but the interaction that I was able to experience was very much a general satisfaction and happiness with the circumstances that the Tibetan population and the people of Xizang have now. So one has to look at these things and say, well, if as it should be, and is not yet resolved, if the fundamental question, or a fundamental question of essential importance is development, if that is not occurring, which it has not been occurring even in the modern period, certainly under the neo-colonialist policies of the Anglo-American policies through the IMF, the World Bank, and others. It will, as it is now emerging with the Global South, with the BRICS, become an issue whereby nations and people will engage in a fight to ensure that those fundamental human rights are not violated. And I mean, this is a complex question, but I don't think that the fundamental question can in any way of development and human development can any longer be avoided if we are going to move out of the neo-colonialist policies and into a new and just world order. So let's work for that. And we can look at these things historically, and I mean, human life being lost at any point is undesirable, but one has to understand what are the ramifications and the purposes of why these battles take place. And as I've already pointed out, the question of geopolitics, which is still a dominant factor in what they call the rules-based order, that should go in the grave of human history. And it is, I think, on its way there. I don't know exactly how long it will take, but I think these emerging global South developments and what we have certainly seen in Xizang are indicative of a new direction, and I don't think it will be stopped, despite the attempts on certain power structures to do that.
Yeah, I think and hope you're right on that, but people might still say that, okay, you say that development is a fundamental human right and that has to be assured for everyone. But someone might say, well, preserving your culture is also a fundamental human right, and also historically the Tibetan Empire, it wasn't only confined to what is today Xizang, but the cultural Tibet, or however you want, historical Tibet or cultural Tibet, however you want to refer to it. The Tibetan Empire, it reached, I mean, we have other provinces with the Tibetan culture as well around it. And some people might say that, no, what's most important is that this unique culture is being preserved, and it should be we should have a, I don't know, Tibetan nation, which has borders that are along the cultural Tibet, historical Tibet, and that should be an independent nation state. What would you respond to that idea?
Well, I mean, that's not realistic. Number one, that's not going to happen. China is not going to accept first of all, it would not be a quote nation state. It's been historically the Tibetan area has been part of in different kinds of imperial forces. That's not a nation state. And of course there are cultural aspects to it, but as I've already pointed out, these cultural, the right to the worship and the freedom of individuals to practice their Buddhist beliefs is not infringed on by the present circumstances. So the argument that this is what is at stake is just not valid. China is not going to relinquish, after whatever you might think of the history, its incorporation of the province into China. That's not going to happen. It can be that some of these, as is also understood, that these separatist forces, which are using the idea of a cultural repression as an argument for retaking vast portions of what was the so-called Greater Tibetan Empire. But these are not based on, number one, on reality as to the actual freedom to worship. They're based on geopolitical interests as to how they can be used fundamentally by forces generally in the West who do not like a strong rising China and are looking for ways to find to attack that and utilize radicalized separatist forces both from inside and outside, as the history of Tibet actually demonstrates that it was a massive intervention even during the 1950s after China had annexed to on the part of the CIA, the British intelligence, and the Americans to finance and supply a resistance movement to overthrow the power in at that time Tibet. So that's the game. It's not based on the idea that you are somehow repressing or preventing the culture of the people of Tibet. That's not happening. So that argument simply has no validity. There might be people who want to repeat it again and again because they play along with the geopolitical game plan. And as I say, you mentioned the British invasion in the beginning of the 1900s. This was the same time, as I've already mentioned, that Halford Mackinder wrote the geopolitical game plan, which was expressed in the explicit form that he who controls the heartland will control the world. The heartland meaning the Asian continent. This was a type of modification of how the maritime British Empire was transforming itself into this kind of land-based geopolitical empire. And that's what we are still struggling to put an end to, or should be. And if people understand these issues, they understand the history, they should wake up and be prepared to join in a genuine effort to elevate human beings everywhere to not alone to a better living standard and economic development, but to true human happiness, which is a topic that one should discuss in more depth. I've taken this up in other contexts in terms of the role of Confucianism and Leibniz, but Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz was a philosophical thinker in the 1600s when there was a great interaction on the part of certain Europeans as well as Chinese scholars. These questions of what really characterizes real human rights in the context of promoting human creativity and happiness, these things have a rhyme and reason, but they have to be understood in a more profound context. Religious freedom is important, but one should understand that there are certain aspects of religious history and freedom which have certain universal principles which are most important and relevant. That doesn't prohibit people's right to their beliefs, but in any sense, but it does mean that there are issues that can be also addressed and should be addressed in the context of both economic development and what constitutes, both philosophically and theologically, the true interests of mankind as a whole.
Okay, I think that will do for today. Or is there anything more that you would like to go into?
No, I think for the for the time being, that's fine. I appreciate the opportunity to have this dialogue. I hope that it will be enlightening for the audience that will have access to it, and we will continue this type of interaction and dialogue, because through that, uh, the broader uh, population in Sweden and in the West is going to become more informed and knowledgeable, which is the beginning of how they can begin to rethink many of the so-called thought processes and axioms, which are unfortunately manipulated by mainstream media and certain forces in the Western political power structure. So we're going to work for that, and I think I'm an optimist. I think eventually we will overcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephen.